Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Cyrus Roberts. I am a co-director of Amplify, and this is my co-director, Angel Villalobos. Like I said, we're part of Amplify, which is one of three co-sponsors of this whole thing. The other ones are Launchpad, which is a new play development program, and then New and Reimagined Works, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a program for new and reimagined works, just to get them out into the world. And so this is just this brain project to bring all these new things together. We want to I'm first going to pass it off to Angel to talk about it, but I just want to thank you all guys for being here right now.
Yeah, thank you all. We're super excited to have you here. This is the first time, we've done a festival like this, so we're super excited, for the staff, students, and Launchpad world and Santa Barbara community to experience something like this. We'd love to start with a quick introduction. If you could let us know, your names, where you're based right now, and what play you're working on. And we can start with Kaiko. Hi.
Hi, I'm Keiko Green. Keiko like a cake. I am currently based in San Diego. I'm a second-year MFA playwright at UC San Diego, and I'm currently in the process of heavily rewriting Exotic Deadly or the MSG play.
Cool. And you can pass it on to whoever you'd like.
Oh, great! I'll pass it on to Milta.
Thanks, Keiko. Hi, I'm Milta Ortiz, and I'm calling in from Tucson, Tohono O'odham, and Yaqui land. I am working also rewriting Pilar and Paloma. I'm working on rewriting the ending some and other parts. So I'm very grateful that I'm here and I get to do that. Do I pass it on to someone else, or did I miss? Okay. So I will pass it to Bihana.
Thanks, Milta. I'm Rohana. I'm the playwright for A People's Guide to History in the Time of Here and Now. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York, also the territorial land of the Lenape. And I am rewriting. My brain froze. I was literally typing like a new word in. Like as I was like, oh God, I gotta hit the Zoom link now. So my brain is a little split in two because just trying to. I'm in the world of the play, and I'm gonna pass it on to another playwright who's probably as like in it as we all are, Eliana.
My name is Eliana Pipes. I am the playwright for Lorena, a Tabloid Epic. I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon, which is the land of the Multnomah and Clackamas people. And I am also in the midst of rewriting. I guess to give away the temporality, we are all after the first day of rehearsal, so I think we're all just like, whew. So it's nice to hear that everyone is. I'm honestly so glad to know that we're all in it. So I'll pass it to Kareem.
Wow, I feel so like this is amazing. I feel so much better because I have not stopped rewriting all day. I'm not just rewriting, I'm also writing because my play is not done yet. So as Cyrus knows, so it's and it might not be done, by the way. It's all good. But yeah, all day. Kareem Fahmy, he, him, his. I'm currently in Norfolk, Virginia, where I split my time between here and New York, and I'm the playwright for American Fast. Do we not have Candace with us? Are we one playwright short today? It's sad.
We are. I wonder if we can text her or something.
Yeah. Risa, will we have Candace?
I think Risa left, didn't she?
I just texted Candace. Hopefully she will be joining us.
Great.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, though, I think we can get started. I'm loving that the camaraderie has already been established in not finishing. I think procrastination always, or not even procrastination, but I know in high school, procrastination always made my strongest friendships. I think it's really cool that we're all here as BIPOC artists and BIPOC writers. Like Angel and I, we're in the BFA program here, but we're both writers too. So, seeing you guys is like, okay, cool. We could make money with this. It's not just a hobby. So I wanted to just start with that. And as BIPOC artists, I know that your trajectory has probably not been the same as other writers in this country. And I want to know how new play development programs like Launchpad has affected your career, and what other programs you'd like to see come out like that. And this could be taken by anyone, pass it off. This is not formal at all. We're just having a conversation here.
All right. Well, I will say that we can almost make a living. No, I'm just kidding. Writing. No, we do. We cobble together things, right? Like we just gotta do it. But yeah, I think that focusing on BIPOC stories is really great, because I think it brings up the question, like, what is a good play, right? Like, what do people consider a good play, and what lens are people reading those plays through? And so I think to focus on BIPOC playwrights challenges that, or perhaps has the reader look at the plays through a new perspective, or maybe through a different lens, or something along those lines. And I appreciate that, because I don't write a standard play typically. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think, I'm one of the playwrights that came to this from acting first. I think a lot of people just start off as acting, whether they're like children or older or whatnot. And so, I remember just being an undergrad and graduating and just kind of feeling like I wasn't finding material that I could really engage with, that spoke to me in the same way some of my white colleagues were finding work that really spoke to them. And so I think that that kind of world building at first started as kind of a challenge for me personally, and now has just become like crucial to my own well-being and hopefully to the well-being of others. And so I think programs like this that are specifically kind of building voices, and I have to say, especially after what's been happening lately within the Asian American communities, being in a rehearsal room last night with so many Asian Americans and Asian faces, it was like medicine. So creating that kind of space is also just kind of, I don't know if people quite realize what an impact that can have on the lives of us as artists.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can add really quick here. Like, my family's Mexican. I'm a first generation student, and like so much of my theater training and so much of the exposure that I've had has been Eurocentric and has been white centric. So like you said, it is refreshing to be in a room with people like us, like we're here and we're doing the thing. Yeah. So last night was the first night, as we're all feeling kind of frenzied about it, and that's so fun, which I think is one of the core sort of staples of Launchpad, which is the development of it and getting into the nitty gritty, and getting your elbows dirty and developing the thing. Last night was the first night of the 20-hour, rehearsal workshop that we're providing, and we were all thrown into the deep end. Actors, writers, directors, designers, everyone. So how did that go? Just can you give us a little bit about, what that first day was like, those jitters, and what are you most looking forward to by the end of, this long and hardworking week?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Thank you, Angel, for being in the room last night and diving into my play with me. It's interesting because, every play is different and every process is different. And particularly with Zoom, learning sort of how to workshop on Zoom, it's its own skill set, I would say. And so, this past year has been all about figuring out what you need and how to get it, and and to deal with like the technological difficulties that everyone will obviously have, because it's it's a machine. And when theater was made to be broadcast in a room all together, so figuring that out is always interesting. But I think what's so exciting is sort of the opportunity to connect with people, even in this in whatever format it's coming into. And with People's Guide, Kareem is like generating new pages, and part of me is like, I love generating just new pages and not knowing what's going on, and I really wish I was at that part of the process. And like, but then like, I'm sure if I was generating pages, I'm like, oh man, I wish I had a script, like I could just like not have to worry about finishing the play. So I think, no matter what part of the process you are, it's always unknown, and it's sort of like you really want people who are willing to take risks and who are willing to dive into the unknown with you. And so I've just been really appreciative that I have that within Launchpad.
Yeah, I feel the same way as Rohana, and it's like, it was really a relief. I was actually like surprisingly very, very nervous starting yesterday because I've never started. Well, it's funny. I have started processes with very little, but it's like it's never with the knowledge that there would be any sort of sharing. And there is always that thing, like, even though, when you're a playwright, it's all about process, right? Like a process, and it's like a product is a production, like every reading is processed, you know what I mean? But still, when you know that you're sharing something publicly, even if it's for just a few people, it is like, it's exposing, right? Like and that's a vital part of what you're supposed to do. Like, you're supposed to expose yourself. And it's like, it's been an interesting process in the pandemic, right? Because when you do gather in spaces in person, you immediately get that sense of like, okay, the community is bolstering you, the community is holding up the work, and it doesn't matter if you don't exactly know what it is yet. And sometimes it's harder to make that connection in Zoom, but then once you actually start hearing the words, that kind of magical thing does start to happen. And it was amazing to me to just like hear voices, start to imagine these characters come alive, and then really helpful to hear, what people are responding to immediately, because, I've always known what I'm interested in, but it's like, I'm always so curious, like, oh, you're interested in that aspect of the story, huh? Oh, and you see it that way. Oh, that's great. And so today's been really fun because I find all those things really cool. So I was like, maybe they should be in the play. So like now they're in the play, and they might not stay in the play, but it was great because, a play lives in a writer's head for so long, but then it's always so great to like build that community around it. And I too love the idea that we can collaborate with people all over the country. I mean, that's the one thing I'll really miss. I think Zoom will be around for a while in theater, but the opportunity to collaborate with people, like here I am in Virginia, and we've got actors all over California and people all over. It's great. I mean, we're so siloed in our communities, and it's really great that it's so much more democratic now.
Have you found like the writing for Zoom and hearing people doing it on Zoom is affecting how you're creating the story? Like, especially since there's a huge lack of blocking and a huge lack of like just having physical spaces. Does it make you focus more on like relationships or anything like that?
Well, I think that's an interesting question because my play actually has movement in it and a lot of visuals, and like I purposely wrote it so there was a lot of scenic design and a lot of magic that could be created with lighting and theatricality, stage theatricality, right? So it's really interesting to have it be on Zoom. And how do you share that? So I'm having the opposite. It was already written, and now it's being shared through the Zoom platform. And I think the director has found a way to make it work. And I think that hopefully the audience will be able to picture inside their, use their imagination to see that on stage theatricality that we can't have on Zoom right now.
I think and on the opposite end of the spectrum, I brought in like a adventure comedy that's really fast paced. So it is that's actually a huge challenge. Is to those kinds of things require so much energy from actors, and it there's a lot of like timing stuff where if like a setup isn't right, then a punchline won't land. So that's one thing that's like kind of, there's no fixing that. But I think it is kind of a teaching moment for actors too, of like, how can I constantly bring vocal energy when the ball keeps getting dropped? You know, and I feel like everybody's learning how to do that, and I'm amazed by the actors who are thriving in this medium.
I think that in some ways the limitations of Zoom have been so sort of like difficult to deal with. My play is Greek, and so there's a chorus, there's a lot of simultaneous dialogue, which is the one thing that Zoom just won't let you do. And that's, you know, a challenge. But at the same time, I think there have also been a lot of ways that the digital platform has allowed us to be really adaptive and to move really quickly. My play also has a projector, and it's been sort of like exciting and easy for us to play with how to make the projector work. There are some things that the sort of digitization makes easier, and some things that it makes much harder. And I think sort of like all things, innovation is born out of limitation. And it's been fun to experiment with. It's nice to think that on the other side of it, there will be things about this play that are stronger because it was workshopped in a Zoom space that maybe we wouldn't have discovered had it been so crunched. And I do think that the other sort of, I feel so hesitant to call it a gift because of course this year has been so terrible, but knowing that this sort of imminent production is not coming and being able to sort of like enjoy the development time and space without having that pressure of like, okay, like 3 weeks of rehearsal, let's go, has been relieving in a way, to just sort of like know that there's nothing, there's sort of like that pressure is released and you can just develop and be in development land and see what that feels like.
Mm. So it's like right now with when you say development, you're talking about like the writing specifically. So yeah, there's a lot more room for it to germinate and just like build in your mind. So I'm also wondering, like, because we're not going to be in this forever, and we weren't in this forever, how has the writing process just like come about? Not even specifically the Zoom, but I guess like you're all like individual like processes. Is processes the right word? It sounds right. Sounds pretty good. Like how has that come about? Because right now, I imagine that it's one of the only things that you could really like dig into, and at least I know it's keeping me afloat. So I'd want to know, like, what was the seed? What was the inspiration where you were like, this is it. This is the way to go.
Can you say a little bit more about your question, Cyrus? When you say inspiration for what? For the plays, or for being a writer, or for writing a pandemic?
Any way that you want to take it, but I was asking for being a writer specifically. But if you want to talk about writing during the pandemic or writing for these plays, I'm not going to stop you. I might stop you a little bit. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I mean, I think it's so tied into like what, you know, what you were touching on earlier about like what kinds of stories are important to put into the world, and how particularly writers of color right now are finding a new moment when our work is being sort of embraced or looked at through a new lens because of everything that the country has been through for so long. And you know, I've always been a big believer that you know, there are these sort of very, very, very long held sort of systems that put, particularly, let's say, like the industry of American theater, sort of always in relationship to like whiteness. Like whiteness is the default and everything else is the alternative, do you know? And now that that's starting to very, very slowly shift, like I don't think the shift is actually as seismic as people want it to be or think it is. Like I think it's like turning around a really, really massive ship, you know? I mean, that Suez Canal thing, which actually happened fast, right? But, you know, so I felt like more urgency to write in the last while, because not to say that this is a bubble that's going to burst, because I do think it's not. I think it's like, again, that big shift. But I'm starting to get to be able to write with way more nuance and sort of specificity than I thought I would be able to, because now I'm like, oh, I'm going to tell this very, very particular, small, specific story that is rooted like in my, you know, this particular play has Egyptian characters and has Muslim characters. So it's very tied in to me. But like, it's also that stuff that I was like, does anybody outside of Islam actually know anything about this? And that to me feels really like vital to be writing those kinds of things right now. Not that it didn't before, but it feels even more necessary now because it's like somebody has to do it. Like somebody has to do it. And so yeah, I've been surprisingly engaged in terms of like not necessarily always writing, but at least finding ideas of things that I feel like, oh, this is a story that I think can actually have a lot of impact in the world. And I should just write them all. So I have like reams and reams of notes on different plays. One of these days I'll write them all, but I think it's a great time to be a writer because also look, sorry, real quick, I'll wrap up this thought. I mean, I just read an article the other day that talked about the number of, I know we're talking about theater here, but the number of scripted television series has more than doubled in the last like 3 years, more than doubled because so many people want stories. They want stories to absorb through various mediums, television and film and podcasts and plays. So it's like, it's a good time to be a writer.
Yeah, I mean, what Eliana and Kareem have both been saying is like kind of been really interesting. The idea of like not working towards production or like working towards this idea of like end goal production, and then also not working within institutions because of pandemic mode, and being away from that and sort of on your own. And then so like how do you define your identity alone outside of some of these places that you might want to mold yourself to fit because you want to have a career and you want to like live as a writer. And so, in terms of, what inspired me, it's kind of moved from like what inspired me and how do I make it fit to just simply like, what do I want to see in the world and what do I want, what would I enjoy? And sort of like you are what you eat is like what someone said. And I really just like loved that for some reason, maybe because I was like a junk food addict and I'm just like, yeah, I'm all like, I'm all preservatives. I'm gonna like look like I'm 15 forever. No, I'm just kidding, I'm not. But I just think about that in terms of art and in terms of like what I'm consuming, and how does what I want to tell relate to that and how does it, even like everything is sort of a story. I had a writing teacher say like, stop, writing in your diary. That's a story that it should, like you're basically using a story up on diary pages, and or like stop tweeting. Like that's a story that could have been. And so that's sort of how I look at it. If I'm spending too much time on social media or something, I'm like, ooh, this play is gonna be real like cesspooly. If I'm on like Twitter too long, I better get out of there and start like consuming something that will lift me up out of this zone. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's sort of how I've been viewing inspiration of late.
Please, anyone jump in, but that Twitter thing is so freaking funny because like I remember like last month I was writing something about people who don't care about each other and I would go on Twitter for inspiration because it's so easy for that. And I was like, this is terrible. I gotta get out of this.
Yeah, it's dangerous. It's a dangerous land out there.
Well, see, I feel that because I'm working on another play, on a musical, and it totally uses social media and social media spin like as one of the things that it's discussing, So, but I have also felt that like, you know what? Let me stop posting so much and focus on a story, like creating that story, that play, that whatever that is, right? That blogging even is more, yeah, I feel that.
So now that we're on the topic of social media, that brings me to habits, and some things that I think are really important and pertinent to us as creators, and to us all specifically as writers, are habits. And we'd personally love to hear about some of the habits that you all hold or wish you held when you were maybe in undergrad. And anyone can jump in.
Something that I this has actually come about for myself in the past year with the pandemic, which has been, I think we all, it used to be a lot easier to like go to a coffee shop or, like you could just go find a place. And if it didn't work for you, you could go to a different one and then just get another iced coffee or whatever it is. And there's something about in the last year having to learn to create a kind of sacred writing space in my own home, even if it's like all it means is I'm going to move to the living room and I'm going to bring up this little table and I'm going to have blah right next to me. Like for me to really thrive in this like writing experience today. Hey,
Hello.
you made it.
Andres, we're here just chatting about super cash. If you'd like to introduce yourself really quick, let us know where you're based and what play you'll be working on. That'd be awesome.
Cool. I'm Candace Jones. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am working on my play, A Medusa Thread, and I am currently based in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you here. We were just talking about habits. Habits as a writer, habits as an artist, now, then, what you wish you could have held as habits, you know, some habits that you find especially pertinent now as an artist. Keiko said space. That's actually quite wonderful because nowadays we're living in the space that we're working in, living in the space that we're presenting in. Like that's my bed back there. You know, like I've slept here all my life and now it's being presented. So yeah, definitely compartmentalizing, right? And like saying this is the space that I'm going to use to work. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is like one thing that I'm sorry, I'm going to continue this one last thing. Like this is actually something I wish someone had told me when I was younger, which is like, announce your goals to one other person. Just like go to your friend and be like, I'm going to have this play done by the end of June. And then, and once you've announced it, like it kind of has to happen and someone to hold you accountable for goals that you set for yourself. Those are my pieces of advice.
That's one cool thing about social media is you can announce it publicly and then now you got to follow through because you put it out there.
Yes.
Self-imposed deadlines is yeah.
Also, I think it's about like not. I mean, it's the same thing that Milton just said, but it's like and Keiko. But you know, when I do talk to younger artists, whether or not they're writers or directors, because I do both, I think that the number one thing I encourage people to do is to not be shy about like who they are, what they're trying to achieve as an artist, like what kind of collaborators they're looking for, what kind of support they're going to need. You know, I think that we always start off sort of this idea that like, oh, I don't want to bother people and I don't want to impose on them and I don't want to send this person an email asking them to read my play or whatever. That's quite literally your job. You know, it's like writing is your job or directing or whatever your artistic practice is. But another part of your job is like the creating community around the work that you're trying to do, because we're theater artists, like we work in community. So that's something that I try to always talk about with younger people, to be like, just reach out to people, like people you know, people you don't know, people you want to know. And it's amazing the things that will happen from that once you get over any barriers you have to that.
Yeah, and I'd add on to that too. Find your first draft buddy. Like, you know, it's sort of like the person that you're like, oh God, I made something really ugly, but will you please look at it and like read it and like talk to me about it? And it's not even about like, you know, like give me your notes, because I think that we're all conditioned to be like, okay, here it is, tell me what's wrong, and then I'll go back and I'll like fix it. But it's actually about someone being like, okay, I wrote this thing, I don't know what it is, can we just like talk about it, like just talk about the things? And then I was like, you know, sometimes I'll just be like, yeah, and then I was deciding whether they should die at the end or if they should go and like start a new job. What do you think? You know, like, and then they're like, you know, then all of a sudden you're talking about how like what the greater meaning is about like commerce and capitalism and like, and is that equate death? And like, it's about like, and it becomes a conversation about something totally different. And so I think the person who you can do that with is the person that you want to be able to share like your very first draft with, because I feel like as a writer, at least for me, the first draft is merely like the clay, and then I get to start doing the fun stuff after that. And so there's so much emphasis on like, I wrote this thing, but it's like, it's not a thing. It's like not a thing yet. And it's not a thing until you start engaging with all those members of the community that like Kareem is talking about and that Eliana is talking about the like accountability, or Keiko, and everybody, everybody's talking about everything. So yeah, that's my advice.
I also want to add on to that, and something you were saying earlier, Rihanna, is don't be afraid of a mess. Like, a play is super messy and it's going to get all messy, and that's great. That's a really great place to be, because you can always go back to it and fix it. So like, it's going to be aim for a crappy first draft. Like, that's takes away the pressure of it being perfect, or like, oh, I can't just get started because it's like too much, right? But I wish I would have known that failing is part of it, and it's a really great learning lesson. Like, try it and fail, and you will grow so much.
Yeah, something that you guys were touching on, especially like with that concept of failing and having like a first draft. I like that phrase, first draft buddy. Is that what it was? I freaking love that, because like I imagine the ones in my lives, and they weren't given that title, but I'm gonna start saying, hey, you're my first draft buddy. You don't have a name anymore. You're now just first draft buddy number one. And I just want to talk about building community a lot more, because it's like writing is one thing, and then putting it out in the world is another thing, and then putting it out in the world trying to pay your rent with it is a whole another thing. So whichever of those steps that wants to be taken, especially with pieces like this, because Angel and I were also the readers for these pieces, and it's very evident that like there's love in these plays. There's anger in these plays, and there's frustration and trauma, and I imagine putting those out and then saying, okay, this is worth this amount of money is like how do you do that? Or putting out and saying this amount of people wants to see it. Like, how do you reconcile those with this community and the world, and like you said, capitalism, and then also just expressing these things that really matter to you? How do those balance?
Yeah, I mean, early on, I'm married to another playwright too, so I'm like doubly screwed in terms of trying to make a living. But early on, what we realized is sort of you can't tie the two together. Like, the money in which you need to live and the art in which you need to live are two separate things. Oh yeah, Milta, you know it. And that, sometimes they might like coalesce in a happy way, but if they don't, that's not a big deal. That you can't make that happen. Otherwise, both are going to suffer. And so like what we figured out is that being a writer is sort of three parts. One is working on your play. Two is working on grant applications and fellowship applications. And then three is like life balance things of like, community building, emails, all those things. So I guess networking, although like, like I'm not the networker here. So I don't know what the hell I was doing with the other third, but apparently maybe networking. But yeah, so those are like the balance of the three that I follow.
I have recently in the past few months have been working as script advisor and or like curation adjacent work for two different theater companies, which has been incredibly enlightening. Playwrights, we should have like another chat about this another time. But one thing that has been fascinating has been a lot of these white-led organizations, majority white-led organizations that are like, our audiences want something fun and kind of like that, like they feel good when they leave, and they're just like, and we're trying to, but we also want people like writers of color, and we're just like having a lot of trouble finding that. And I'm like, yeah, doy, like of course you're having trouble finding that. Like who's happy right now? Who the people like we even one of my favorite playwright friends who's a woman who is just scathingly funny. Her plays make me laugh so hard, and they're cruel and so scathing, and it's because she's mad. And so there's like this, it's all through this white lens, this expectation that we're like doing it for subscribers, and that's just something that you have to cut yourself away from, because I think that right now we are living in an exciting time where theaters are like, oh, they are hiring people like me to tell them that. And I think that's really important. I mean, I can't be the only person, you know? And so that means that they're like ready to kind of learn and maybe slowly change, ? But there is this reckoning that's happening right now where they're like, oh, this model isn't working for how our theater has been building. Like, we're completely relying on donations, and it's like becoming a charity, and this is not sustainable. And so I think that this is a scary time and a very exciting time for people like you who are young and going to like go into this theater world that is kind of like ready to be remolded. I don't think this answered any question, but that's what I have for you.
I love that point. And I think the sort of calling back to the conversation we were having earlier about like, where do we find inspiration as writers? I think that, you know, I think there was for a long time a sort of expectation that plays by writers of color be about trauma and be sad and be like all about the hardship. I think, you know, will always continue to be a sort of like pressure around ambassadorship. I loved what you were saying, Kareem, around like, is anybody going to know what this little thing means other than me? But I think the urgency for stories like that is really increasing because, you know, there was that question of who gets to be universal, and is it just Eugene O'Neill? Like, actually, probably Kareem's very specific story is so universal, and getting institutional recognition of that is so crucial. And I agree, hopefully something that's happening. And I do also think that it puts a reflexive pressure on writers and a pressure on the sort of whole process of creation. I loved sort of hearing everybody talk a little bit about their pieces, and like Milta talking about the dance component and Keiko the comedy specific to your piece. I think that there's a lot of sort of like formal play and formal experimentation going on with writers who are coming from perspectives that are not represented in the mainstream theater world, because I think you have to innovate on form in order to authentically present an experience that hasn't been presented before. I feel like we have to create a new language, or we sort of like by necessity end up innovating on form because the formal language that exists in the theater was not built for us. And it's harder. In my personal opinion, it's much harder. And I think that that's another thing that I sort of wish that I knew earlier, like you know, trying to find references or trying to like place yourself in a lineage is harder. And I think that you know, creates barriers for young writers, and, you know, barriers that I'm still feeling myself. And I think the questions of gaze and the questions of, even if I make this piece that feels so authentic, am I handing it to somebody who even has the ability to see or understand me, is also, you know, scary and fraught. I think it's so hard. And the pressures of, you know, making work under capitalism is really stressful. I don't know. I just think, yeah, it's so exciting to be able to have conversations like this and to be having spaces like this, even if it's a Zoom space. Because, yeah, I do think that these questions are becoming so much more urgent.
I love that. I just want to touch really quick on the idea of universality, like the question of whether or not these pieces that we're creating will be universal. But then I think all I ever wanted when I was in beginning acting was not a piece that was universal to everyone, but a piece that fit in my universe. A piece that made sense in my universe, in my patriarchal, Hispanic, you know, like gritty family. Like, I never got any of that. And I don't care if it doesn't apply to every other donor out there, but the fact that it applies to me as an actor and as a young artist means the world. And I think that's what we're all doing here, you know, are creating pieces that are people's universe. It's great. I'm revved up. Cyrus.
Yeah. And then creating these universes, like, it seems like that's what you guys are doing, what you guys talked about. I remember, Keiko, you were talking about, you know, there's not a space, there's not these stories I want to tell for me. How do I do that? And it just evolved into this like whole career. So I want to know how that tied in specifically to these pieces. What universes that were absent in this grand multiverse, where this metaphor is going too far. What were you guys trying to create? What spaces did you not see were being formed that you were trying to create in these pieces that we're going to be watching? What exactly? What MCU are you?
And before, like, while you're answering this, or before you answer, can you give us the name of your play again so that everyone at home knows exactly what we're talking about?
Andrew.
I was actually going to add on to what you were saying, Angel. So my play is Pilar en Paloma. And it was really cool last night to hear some of the feedback. And somebody said the mom character is so iconic. And it was because they recognized the mom as their own mom, their own Latina mom, you know, that and then somebody else said that the play spoke to her because it's about sisters, and that's a very, you know, we all have siblings or know people that have siblings, you know what I mean? So there were other entry points into the play, like the colloquial language is what somebody said, or you know, the sister relationship. But I think for me, I always write through my experience through, and even though I necessarily haven't lived the experience I'm writing about in the play, I am an immigrant. And so I see the world through that lens. And I remember what it was like growing up and not seeing myself reflected and feeling less than because of that, because I didn't know my history. I didn't know my roots. I didn't know anything about myself. And so I thought I had none. And so that is what drove me to write, because I learned, it took me a long time to learn about myself and my own history and my own stories. And I didn't want any other young girl to feel that way. And so that's what drives me. And now that I live here in Tucson in the Sonoran Desert, I notice that I write about the environment in which I'm in. The space that I'm in really impacts me. And I think it's because I'm an immigrant and I know what it's like to leave a place and make new roots. And so a place, I think, is very important to me, even though I've never realized that recently. You know, I've recently just come to realize that space is important, and not that I live in my own native space, right? But I've planted roots in these other places, and so I write about them. And I wanted to write about. I find myself writing about immigration in various ways, though. I wanted to write something that was not about the issue, was about something more deeper than that, about how interconnected we are as human beings to the land, to the native species, all of us. And I am on Tohono O'odham land, and the border actually cuts through Tohono O'odham land. So I hadn't seen too many stories out there or plays about that. And so it was really awesome last night that a couple of the native people that were in the room got it. They just were like, yo, Yamil is the trickster character. Like, this would be a Lakota myth, you know what I mean? And then somebody else they just picked up on things that felt authentic to them. And that was such a great gift to hear that. So yeah, I'm just writing from my authentic experience, really.
Could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, I just want to know, because we're talking about creating the stories that we don't see in the world, and how that kind of idea was presented through these pieces that you all have put together.
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts about that. So I, as a playwright from rural Arkansas, I'm constantly hearing people say, "Oh, we want to hear stories from your part of the country," you know, or from the rural South. We really need to hear those stories, and I think it's rooted in what's you know, of course, with a lot of political issues today, with the insurrection that happened January 6th, and I've been hearing that phrase prior to that, or people requesting that prior to that, and so and that's not the reason why I write the stories that I write, because I do write plays that are all based in the rural South or are currently influenced by the rural South. And I often find myself at a crossroads because it's and I'm sure that everybody, it's sometimes you get in you have an experience where you have the you are lucky enough to have collaborators who can get those nuances, and it's and I'm not, I don't know what am I trying to say? It's always an interesting experience sharing this world, these people, these nuances with individuals who are not in alignment with that. So it's it becomes it becomes such a learning experience for everyone involved. And the learning experience is it always happens with grace, but it's just definitely one of those things that it's always like a really really intense push and pull regarding what in my world do I share and what do I keep quiet about. And not saying that I feel censored. Well, at times I have felt censored, but there you overcome that. But it's always it's great that people are asking for these stories from marginalized groups and things like that. But getting very the liberal mindset sometimes can be very idealized. Getting some of those idealized mindsets to understand this is the good and the bad of it, and this is what we, and this is how I'm choosing to tell this story, can always be an interesting process. Yeah, and you have to be vocal during the process. But it's it's as far as the experience of it is always like interesting and can get intense.
And I'm just thinking about how you create these stories and then you do it through the lens of Medusa. It's like, but it makes sense. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
In my play is Exotic Deadly. It's I've been thinking a lot about the universe of it and where it came about just this past couple weeks. I grew up outside Atlanta. And so Asian women in Georgia, in Atlanta right now is just like obviously really on my mind. And it comes back to like the initial idea for this play came from, I think that the othering and a kind of like forever foreign Asian person, the people that it comes from actually like really small little nuggets. It starts off, I think, with like a kid hearing their parent try something that's stinky or tastes different for the first time and saying ew, and like that is transferred to this kid, and that's the first moment in their lives of like, oh, things that are different from my world are gross or weird or ew. And so so my play is really tackling this like tiny little thing and really blowing it up into like a Bill and Ted style, like insane play, time traveling play. But that is really what it's getting at, is that like first moment of view. I guess that's my MCU for my play, my universe.
I'm thankful for it too, because the whole MSG thing I had no idea about. And I was like, wow, reading about it, I was like, yo, that's okay. Examine personal biases. Cool. Definitely extended over to me.
I know, Kareem, you were about to say something. I'd love to hear a little bit about the universe of everyone's play before we close.
Sure. I mean, my play, American Fast, I mean, the universe is very much like a very specific universe, which is college campuses, college basketball, um, women in sports, women in Islam, and just like how all of those, the Venn diagram of all of those things. And it's a little bit like I'm writing about a myth because I don't actually, the play isn't modeled after a specific athlete or a specific story, but I was trying to like imagine myself into this sort of world where a Muslim person has to actually like publicly deal with faith in a very active way. And I think that I was really attracted to tell that story because I think it's more than just like, oh, there are misconceptions about Islam. I mean, that's like, we've been saying that forever, right? But it's like, I actually think that we're afraid to talk about the practice of faith when it comes to faiths that are not in this country, in America. You if it's not Christianity or Judaism, we're afraid to like talk about the practice of faith. It's like, I can't talk about that, or I don't not necessarily the belief in faith, but the practice of faith. So I've been really for a long time trying to figure out a story that can talk about how faith is practiced and the various ways that's perceived. And I just thought that placing that in the context of something as public as sports, particularly nationally televised sports, I thought would be a great pressure cooker of a situation for these characters.
Mm.
Yeah. Sorry, Angel, you heard some of this last night, but I'll try to be more succinct today. I wrote A People's Guide to History in the Time of Here and Now. I started writing it like immediately after the 2016 election, just to sort of decipher my own emotions happening. Because I felt really angry. Cyrus, some of the rage of the scripts you're reading, a lot of it probably came from mine. I was like real mad, and then also very sad and feeling a little bit betrayed. And it felt a lot like how I felt in the days following 9/11. And then like I started hearing just stories of everyone like, yeah, New York, like after 9/11, we all came together. I'm like, really? We all came together? Then who was spitting on me when I was running home to see if my sister was okay? And who like left a flyer of someone whose eyes were burnt out, of a South Asian woman missing on my doorstep? So like, I don't know what kind of like time period you were all living in. And then I started to think about how the years following that incident really led us to the 2016 election, and how history keeps getting forgotten, and what does that mean when it gets rewritten all the time, and the people who have stories that go against what is being recorded, like what happens to them, what happens to their stories, what happens to their history. And so then it became a time hopping piece, sort of between the years following 9/11 up through 2016 election, and just sort of exploring what it means to be so young that you weren't even like born for 9/11, and yet you're being taught it in classrooms with very insufficient materials. And it's interesting because, sorry, this is long, but as I wrote it, the years kept going on, and then it started becoming a play, because initially it was just like a jumble, and then as you get more distance from it, it's more of a play, but you also forget like what happened. Like I was going through my emails today. This was my writing process, so you won't see like a lot of new pages, but you will see like that I went through all of my 2016 emails to see like what was going on and what we were writing about and what we were worried about, and it seems a little bit ludicrous now, but yeah. Okay, that's my universe.
That was such a cool universe. Oh, wow. I really appreciated this. I'm so excited to see all these plays. My play is called Lorena, a Tabloid Epic. It's about Lorena Bobbitt, who became a tabloid sensation in 1993 when she used a kitchen knife to cut off her abusive husband's penis. Can we say penis? I guess we'll see. I found out about this story as in 2019 for the first time. I was like not yet alive when it happened, and so I just became so obsessed with her story, and then so obsessed with how obsessed everyone else was with her story. And it was like the further you go in, the worse it gets. And her story really became American spectacle. Like between the 24-hour news cycle and the like press releases, there was just so much going on with it. And so the play is really interested in the relationship between gender violence and spectacle, and asking the question, how do we talk about this? Like, how do we still tell stories about this? The play sort of takes place in this big Greeky, tabloidy void. It's like a big vignette play. Characters come in and out. The penis has a monologue. Medea comes down from the sky in her bloody chariot. Sort of anything can happen in this space. And there's a playwright character trying to keep the Lorena character sort of safe through all of it, and to sort of like figure out how to tell this story in a way that will vindicate her, that will somehow change what has happened in the 25 years that have elapsed since her case. And really the play is interested in sort of taking this like big, epic, horrifying story and bridging the distance between, you know, the smaller human story at the core of it and the way that it was sort of exploded through the media. And I guess, yeah, that's what I'll share about the world of the play for now.
Just in case you weren't supposed to say it, I'll say it with you. Penis. There, now two of us can get in trouble. Just kidding. Kendra said that she mentions Lorena in her play too, so that's cool. A little connection we made there. Look at that.
Yeah. And she might not remain, but she is mentioned in a monologue as like, and of course the act of cutting part of the penis off, and yeah. So now we have 3 penises on the, yeah. But yeah. I had to explain to my cast last night who Lorena Bobby was, because a lot of them are, you know, too young to remember. Yeah, so.
Cool. Cyrus, if you want to come back on. This has been wonderful, to say the least, to just be, like we were saying earlier, in a space with wonderful, artistic, talented individuals like yourselves, and to just chat about inspirations, habits, our universes, all these conversations. I can only hope and pray that more young artists like Cyrus and I, and all the people watching at home, are exposed to conversations and to individuals like us here. Cyrus.
But yes, I just want to, and I'm just gonna pass it back to you right now.
All right, that's okay. I'd like to echo what Risa said down there. So thankful to have you all here. Very excited to see how the rest of the process goes. It's a super quick, you know, Launchpad gritty week, and all I can say is good luck and have fun and take risks. And to everyone watching out there, have fun. Love you all. Thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.